Thank you. And again, thanks for your work on behalf of our country. I appreciate it. The way ISIL or Daesh is configured is qualitatively different than what we've been dealing with in the past, with Al Qaeda and Hezbollah. They actually control a huge swath of territory in Iraq and Syria. They also control some of those oil fields up around Mosul. So we've had a really hard time with their cross-border transfers. And we've been out to Al-Qaim on the Iraq-Syrian border, and those it's a very porous area in terms of security. Those smuggling routes have been in operation for 1,200 years, and they're still going strong. Mr. Shanzer, your comments on Turkey are spot on. We went up, myself and Mr. Ellison went up to the Syrian border, a couple of the refugee camps there, and we were able to look at some of our aerial and satellite imagery where you have trucks going across from Daesh-controlled areas going into Turkey selling that oil. And yet when we confronted the senior members of the Turkish government, they were in complete denial, even though we pointed out the evidence. So we've got some real trust issues there, and I'm glad you spoke to that issue. But it appears that, as you said in your recent remarks, we're a victim of our own success in a way by driving out through this regulatory deployment of disincentivizing banks because of the reputational damage and the risk for them to engage in terrorist financing. So we've done very well on that part. But FinCEN and Treasury and the way we have deployed against this threat doesn't seem to address this new iteration, which is cross-border transfer of resources, whether it's oil or cash, whatever it is. We don't seem to be really configured in a way to address that. Do you have a sense of how we could better, post up against what they're doing now?
Well, thank you for the question. And look, it is a challenge. Part of the structures right now entail FATF working with countries to establish norms to which they will be able to better, for example, handle cross-border trafficking and bulk cash smuggling and weapons transfers and the like. But at the end of the day, speaking to Turkey in particular, the issue is about cooperation. And as you note, if the Turks, for example, are not willing to work with us, are not willing to acknowledge the problem, we're going to have some challenges. And so my assessment is that we need to work with the Turks to perhaps address some of their concerns about Syria. We know that a lot of the reason why they've opened this border is because they seek the downfall of Bashar al-Assad, and they're very frustrated with us because we have reneged on our promises with regard to the red line, et cetera, from a couple of years ago. Yeah. That said, as legitimate as those grievances may be, we are going to have to get tougher with the Turks about that border. It's 565 miles long. It is manageable, but we're going to need better cooperation. They're going to have to stop the flow of weapons, the flow of fighters. Thank you.
I have one more minute. Mr. Jones and Mrs. Zarate, thank you as well. One of the other things that we've been having a hard time getting at is the resource flow through hawalas. And have there been any, and I know, Mr. Jones, you mentioned zakat in terms of a revenue source as well, and I think there's straight-out taxation going on in parts of the territory that Daesh controls right now. But have we been able to get at this informal value transfer system, the hawalas and hawaladas that operate in these areas? Because a lot of it's based on trust. I know it's tied closely to the mosque, and I know there's some reluctance of even our friends in that region to get involved or disrupt that. Have we had any measurable success in that regard?
Well, Mr. Lynch, that's a great question. The Hawalas have been clearly identified by multiple U.S. agencies as being a source of serious concern, and they have for some time. There have been some success in interdicting some of the money that have flown through Hawalas if they're putting it in the financial system, so if they're putting it into bank accounts that have been disrupted. The challenge, though, is almost an intelligence one if they're using second, third, and fourth parties to hide that money in whether it's bank accounts or in some cases we've seen it in Yemen in warehouses, storing it in warehouses, is identifying the location of it. So that is one issue, and frankly it's more of an intelligence challenge than it is necessarily of at least immediately disrupting.
Yeah. Mrs. Zarate?
Mr. Lynch, it's a great question. The U.S. government has been focused on this for quite some time. I was in Abu Dhabi for the issuance of the first declaration on the need to regulate hawalas. Since then, the FATF, the U.S. government, and others have focused on this from a regulatory perspective. And so countries like the UAE have tried to register hawalas as money service businesses, tried to impose anti-money laundering regulations to try to bring transparency and accountability. But Seth is right. Much of this is getting into the networks, and the U.S. has done that relatively well, I think. You look at the Afghan Threat Finance Cell, which was established by the DEA, the military. They have actually raided and gotten into some suspect hawaladars. U.S. Treasury has designated some of them. And at the end of the day, hawaladars, which basically rely on trusted brokers to transfer value across borders, really do provide an ability to follow the money. They keep meticulous records. They know their customer often better than bank tellers know their customers. Yeah. And it's a matter of ensuring that those hawalas and hawaladars are not doing anything illegal and not dealing with terrorists. And I think that's a regulatory challenge. It's an enforcement challenge. It's also an intelligence challenge.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you.
Now